For as long as humanity has existed, we've been haunted by tales of the supernatural, whispers of restless souls, flickering shadows, and eerie encounters that defy explanation. Across centuries, civilizations have passed down stories of the dead returning to walk among the living. But where did these ghostly legends begin? Join me as we journey through the mists of time to uncover some of the earliest recorded ghost stories, leading us to the very first ghost story ever told. Welcome back, Darklings. Our journey begins in the year 856 AD, where we encounter the very first poltergeist in recorded history. In the quiet countryside of Bingen, Germany, a family lived in a small farmhouse surrounded by dense forests. But their peaceful life was about to be shattered by something terrifying. One evening, as the family gathered around the hearth, strange noises began to echo through their home. At first, they heard faint knocks, then noises like distant footsteps. But soon, the sounds grew louder. Stones, cold and sharp, began to fall from nowhere, striking the walls, floors, and even the family themselves. Objects flew across the room, as if some unseen force was taking control of their home. Terrified, they huddled together, but the worst was yet to come. Without warning, fires broke out in different parts of the house. The flames seemed to spring up from thin air, crackling violently as the family scrambled to put them out. What kind of spirit could do this? Not a quiet ghost, silently watching from the shadows. This was something different and far more dangerous, something that could interact with the physical world, causing chaos and destruction in its wake. The family's dread grew with each passing moment, as the strange fires and flying objects showed no signs of stopping. Though the original accounts of this haunting are now lost, the story was passed down through medieval records and manuscripts, becoming one of the earliest documented cases of its kind. We now call this a poltergeist, a word that comes from the German term meaning noisy spirit. Unlike other ghostly apparitions, poltergeists don't just haunt, they create noise, move objects, and unleash chaotic disturbances. The poltergeist of Bingen left its mark on the family, its legend spreading far and wide through medieval Europe. To this day, poltergeist activity remains one of the most feared and mysterious forms of supernatural encounters. Now we travel back even further to the heart of Anglo-Saxon England. Here, a monk named the Venerable Bede chronicled the history of his time, stories of kings, battles, and the supernatural. Among the many accounts Bede left behind, one tale stands out, a ghostly encounter that blurs the line between life and death. It begins with a man wandering deep into the forest one cold night. But he's not alone. A shadowy figure appears before him, silently beckoning, urging him deeper into the darkness. The man follows, compelled by some invisible force, as the ghost leads him further into the heart of the woods. Suddenly, the ghost stops, and the man is overcome with a vision of the future, a revelation so terrifying it shakes him to his core. He sees a shadowy landscape where the souls of the damned are condemned to eternal suffering, separated from the light of salvation. The sight of this bleak and hopeless afterlife fills him with dread, as he realizes the fate that awaits the unrepentant. But this was no ordinary ghostly encounter. In Anglo-Saxon England, spirits weren't just lost souls, they were messengers. Ghosts often appeared to deliver warnings, prophecies, or divine punishments. For Bede, such encounters were a reminder of mortality and the ever-present battle between good and evil. This ghostly encounter was chronicled by the Venerable Bede in his Ecclesiastical History of the English People, written in the early 8th century. Bede, a respected scholar and monk, often included supernatural events in his historical writings to reflect the spiritual beliefs of Anglo-Saxon England. Now we travel to ancient Rome, where one of the most famous ghost stories was recorded by Pliny the Younger in a letter to his friend in the 1st century CE. The story begins with a mysterious house in Athens. Though the house was grand and well situated, it carried a dark reputation. Locals believed it was haunted, and no one dared to live there. But when the philosopher Athenodorus heard about the property and its low price, he wasn't swayed by the rumours. A man of reason, unafraid of spirits, Athenodorus bought the house without hesitation and moved in, determined to continue his life as usual. One evening, as Athenodorus sat in his study, writing by candlelight, he heard the faint clinking of chains in the distance. At first he dismissed it, focusing on his work, but the sound grew louder, steadily creeping closer with each passing moment. When the noise finally reached his room, Athenodorus looked up and saw the figure of an old man, gaunt and hollow, with long matted hair. Heavy chains were shackled to his wrists and ankles, dragging noisily behind him. The ghost raised a bony finger, motioning for Athenodorus to follow. Unshaken, the philosopher calmly gestured for the ghost to wait and returned to his writing. But the spectre was insistent, waving more urgently, demanding his attention. With a sigh, Athenodorus finally rose and followed the ghost. The old man led him silently through the house, out into the garden, and then to a spot in the yard, where he suddenly vanished without a trace. Athenodorus marked the spot, and the next day called upon the authorities to investigate. When they dug, they uncovered a skeleton bound in chains, buried beneath the earth. Athenodorus arranged for the remains to be given a proper burial, and from that day on, the house was no longer haunted. The ghost's restless spirit had finally found peace. This tale is considered one of the earliest recorded ghost stories in Roman literature. It reflects the Roman fascination with ghosts, the afterlife, and the belief that unburied remains could cause unrest for the dead. Pliny's recounting of this tale shows his interest in both supernatural phenomena and rational investigation, as Athenodorus approaches the haunting with calm, reasoned skepticism. Going back even further in time, we find ourselves in ancient Greece, over 2,800 years ago. While historical accounts, like those of Pliny the Younger, recount real-life ghost sightings from ancient times, mythology also offers a wealth of ghostly tales. For instance, in Homer's epic poem The Odyssey, written around the 8th century BCE, we find one of the earliest and most famous encounters with the dead. Odysseus, desperate for guidance on his difficult journey home, seeks to consult the great seer, Tiresias. However, Tiresias has long since passed into the realm of the dead, so Odysseus must descend into the underworld to seek his wisdom. Only there can he find the seer's spirit and receive the prophecy that will help him navigate the perils ahead. With trembling hands, Odysseus performs the grim ritual, digging a pit and filling it with the blood of sacrificed animals, for it is only by drinking blood that the dead can speak to the living. As the blood pools, the spirits begin to emerge, drawn toward it like moths to a flame. The air grows cold, and the shadowy figures of the deceased surround him, their whispers filling the silence. Suddenly, among the pale faces, Odysseus sees someone he knows, his fallen comrade, Elpenor. The sight of him is a shock, for Elpenor had died in a drunken fall, and his body lay unburied on a distant island. Elpenor pleads with Odysseus to return and give him the burial rites he deserves, lest his soul remain restless. As Odysseus moves deeper into the underworld, another figure emerges from the shadows, his own mother, Anticlea. Odysseus's heart wrenches with sorrow, and he reaches out, desperate to hold her once more, but his arms pass through her, touching nothing but cold air. All around him, the shades of the dead press closer, warriors who still wear their blood-stained armor, maidens who died too young, and spirits whose lives were cut short by violence. They are trapped in this dark, hopeless realm, forever caught between life and death, waiting for the blood that grants them a fleeting moment of life. Another chilling ghost story from ancient Greece was recorded in a letter by Proclus in late antiquity. It recounts the haunting tale of Philinion, a young maiden who died unexpectedly, only to return from the grave to haunt her parents' home. Machati, a guest in the home of a wealthy family, encountered a mysterious and beautiful woman on his first night. He spent the night with her, and in the morning, she left him with a small gift. This strange encounter repeated for 3 nights, as he became increasingly enchanted by her presence. But on the 3rd night, Philinion's parents discovered the shocking truth. They burst into the room to find their deceased daughter lying beside Machati, back from the dead. With an eerie, detached gaze, Philinion declared that her return was the will of the gods. Yet as she spoke, her body once again collapsed lifeless before their eyes. Terrified, the family rushed to her tomb, where they uncovered an even more horrifying revelation. Felinian's grave was empty, and the items buried with her were the very same gifts she had given to Machati. Panic swept through the town as the villagers realized the gravity of the situation. Fearing further supernatural occurrences, they took drastic action. They gathered Felinian's remains, and in desperation, burned her body outside the city walls to prevent her from ever returning. This eerie tale, preserved through ancient letters, reflects the ancient Greeks' profound fear of the dead returning and the divine power they believed governed both life and death. Travelling even further back in time, we arrive in the ancient land of Egypt, nearly 3,300 years ago. Egypt was a land of gods, pharaohs, and intricate beliefs about the afterlife. It's here, among the towering pyramids and hidden tombs, that we find one of the earliest ghost stories ever recorded, the ghost of Nekhen. This tale begins in a temple where a high priest carried out his sacred duties late into the night. But something was different on this evening. The air was heavy with an otherworldly presence. As the priest moved deeper into the temple's inner chamber, he suddenly found himself face to face with a shadowy figure. A ghost, its form flickering in the dim light. The ghost was not silent. It spoke, its voice filled with sorrow and desperation, pleading with the priest to perform the burial rites that had been neglected. Without the proper rituals, this spirit could not pass into the afterlife. The priest, recognizing the gravity of the situation, vowed to carry out the necessary rituals to guide the spirit safely to the afterlife. This story is one of the earliest recorded ghost stories from ancient Egypt and appears on numerous religious texts found in tombs and temples. In ancient Egypt, the afterlife was a delicate balance of rituals and beliefs. The story of the ghost of Nekhen reveals the deep fear the Egyptians held for the restless dead, spirits that would return to the world of the living, desperate for peace. Egyptian burials, especially for pharaohs, were rich and elaborate, involving mummification, magical spells from the Book of the Dead, and intricate rituals to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. But for ordinary people, simpler rites were performed, offering food, prayers, and personal belongings to guide the soul through the journey. Without these rituals, even the common soul could risk being trapped, restless, and unable to find peace. And finally, we arrive at the oldest known ghost story in history, a tale written over 4,000 years ago in the ancient land of Mesopotamia. The story is the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest surviving pieces of literature, and at its heart is the tale of a king and a ghost. The tale recounts the adventures of Gilgamesh, a king who embarks on a quest seeking immortality. After the death of his closest companion, Enkidu, Gilgamesh was consumed with grief, but more than that, he became terrified of his own mortality. In a haunting vision, Gilgamesh encounters the ghost of his friend, Enkidu. Emerging from the shadowy depths of the underworld, the spirit is but a faded remnant of the man he once was, gaunt and hollow, drained of the vitality that had once defined him. Gilgamesh, desperate for answers, asks his friend what death is like, but the answer he receives is far from comforting. Enkidu portrays the underworld as a dark, hopeless realm, a house of dust, where the dead are bound and fed clay and stone. It is a place devoid of light, where souls wander in eternal darkness, forgotten by the living. For the first time, Gilgamesh understands the full weight of death. In this ancient ghost story, the spirit of Enkidu brings with it a message from beyond the grave, a message of the grim reality of the afterlife. Unlike later ghost stories, where spirits seek justice or resolution, this tale reflects the earliest human fears, that death is a final, inescapable descent into the unknown. But the Epic of Gilgamesh is just the beginning. In ancient Mesopotamia, ghost sightings were common and frequently recorded on clay tablets. Everyone believed in ghosts. It was a normal part of daily life, unlike the skepticism we see today. Ghosts were so much a part of everyday life that they were viewed as pests, much like a mouse scurrying through your home. They believed ghosts could cause illnesses, particularly headaches or migraines, as it was thought that these spirits could slip into your ear while you slept. Mesopotamia also boasts the first ever image of a ghost. It shows an old man being led to the afterlife by a young woman. And just as ghosts were a part of life, so too were the exorcists who dealt with them. If you were troubled by a ghost, you could visit a specialist at the local market who would provide you with an amulet or perform a ritual to rid you of the spirit. If that didn't work, another notable method involved creating a small sculpture or figurine of a partner for the restless ghost. This figure was crafted from materials like clay or corn and placed in a bed overnight to marry the ghost. The idea was that the ghost, now having a companion, would no longer be lonely and would stop haunting the living, thereby finding peace. This unique ritual was part of their broader belief in the importance of ensuring that spirits were content and properly guided to the afterlife. Necromancy also existed in ancient Mesopotamia, though it was frowned upon. If you dared, you could use the skull of a dead relative, and a specialist would perform a ritual with magic words so you could speak with the deceased. It was believed that the dead could even predict the future, a practice both feared and revered. In ancient Mesopotamia, ghosts weren't just distant, mysterious figures. They were a part of everyday life. Their presence was a reminder of death, but also of the belief that the living and the dead were never too far apart. As we move forward through history, the way we see ghosts has changed, but our fascination with them has not. From the first whispers of restless spirits carved into clay tablets to the haunted tales we tell today, one thing is clear: ghost stories are more than just stories. They are a part of who we are, of our human need to explain the unexplainable, to face our fears of the unknown, and perhaps to be comforted by the possibility that death is not the end. But what about you? Have you ever had a ghostly encounter? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this eerie video, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out my video on the origins of Frankenstein, where I explore the real-life horrors behind the tale. See you in a future video.